Welcome to Only Joe, where UFO lore, demons, and government nonsense all collide. This one has everything. Alien beams in the woods, a vice president getting dragged for saying demons, Bob Lazar refusing to die as a story, and the Catholic Church somehow showing up with a technical category for weird stuff. Start with Travis Walton, because this case is still annoyingly hard to wave away. Back in 1975, he disappears for 5 days after his crew sees a beam of light, and the weird part is not just the headline weirdness, it's that the details have stayed remarkably consistent for decades. Walton passed polygraphs, his companions passed polygraphs. Even a witness who had beef with him still backed the event. That doesn't prove aliens did a pickup in the forest, but it does make this one of those cases where the usual easy dismissal starts to feel lazy. Then there's J.D. Vance calling UFOs demons, which sounds like the kind of clip that gets posted with 10 fire emojis and zero context. But there is context. Catholic theology has this middle draw called the preternatural. Basically, it's for events that are real or at least experienced as real, but not miracles, not automatically divine, not automatically breaking the laws of God, just deeply weird. That lets thinkers going back to Aquinas sort UFO-like encounters into angelic or demonic territory without saying every light in the sky is a miracle. So when Vance uses demon language, the point wasn't necessarily horror movie devil stuff, it was a theological label. Still, I get the pushback. Once a public figure says demons, normal people hear horns, not taxonomy. Gary Nolan brought up one of the creepiest ideas in this whole space, the hitchhiker effect. That's the claim that after an encounter, the phenomenon sort of follows you home. Not ideal, you go looking for answers and apparently the answers start rattling around your house. It lines up with old haunting stories, and it may help explain why some experiences don't become enthusiastic truth seekers. They become people who would very much like the weirdness to stop. Whether that's psychological fallout, something anomalous, or some ugly combination of both, it's a real pattern in the reports. John Keel took that pattern and went full galaxy brain with the super spectrum. His idea was that UFOs, ghosts, religious visions, all of it, might be different faces of one hidden reality brushing up against us. And Keel was not optimistic about it. He thought, apparently, benevolent encounters were still deceptive underneath. That's one reason this field gets so dark so fast. The minute you unify all paranormal weirdness, every campfire story starts sharing an email server. That also connects to the prophetic side of encounters because abductees and contact experiences often report messages about the future. A few seem accurate, most are wrong. That's a terrible batting average if we're dealing with enlightened cosmic mentors. Researchers who take the report seriously end up asking whether the deception is part of the phenomenon. And then it gets even messier, because how do you separate a genuine vision from an ordinary dream when the same person is having both? You really can't do that cleanly. Now we get to the fun civil war inside UFO culture, which is basically Bob Lazar on one side and Richard Doty making everybody suspicious of everybody. Lazar's credibility keeps surviving because a few details have aged weirdly well. He identified the S4 location and layout before it was public, and his name later turned up on an employee roster after people claimed he never worked there at all. Even more interesting, his technical talk about how the craft operated has been compared to footage and reporting that surfaced much later, including material tied to the 2017 New York Times bombshell. That doesn't settle everything, but it keeps the case alive in a way a lot of old UFO stories just aren't. Then enter Richard Doty, who flat out admitted to planting false UFO material on researchers' computers to steer them toward approved conclusions. That's not fringe gossip. That's a former Air Force officer describing misinformation as a tool. So every time someone says, well, maybe the civilian researchers are just confused, yeah, maybe, but maybe they were deliberately made confused. That's why the disclosure fight is really two stories at once. One is the cosmic story. Are we being visited, manipulated, contacted, whatever? The other is the much more earthly story about classified programs, missing oversight, and the possibility that billions got shuffled around while Congress was kept in the dark. People asking for amnesty say it's the only way insiders will talk. Critics hear that and go, hold on, are we forgiving people before we even know whether they hid non-human tech or just ran an unholy boondoggle? Honestly, the fraud and waste angle may be the most believable reason secrecy stays so locked down. Aliens are dramatic. Accounting is dangerous. Another thing that messes with the neat extraterrestrial story is how far back these sightings go. You can find accounts from the 1700s and 1800s that sound weirdly familiar now. That's awkward if you expect alien technology to look progressively more advanced to human observers over time, while our own tech changed basically everything. So either the phenomenon isn't extraterrestrial in the simple nuts and bolts sense, or it's presenting itself in a deliberately constrained way. Same mystery, different wallpaper. One of the strangest and most current ideas in the mix is Diana's suggestion that AI could become a new perceptual faculty, meaning not just a chatbot, but a tool that helps humans interface with intelligences we normally can't sense. That gets linked to old visionary traditions and to reports of telepathic communication in abduction cases. It's a wild idea, but it fits this recurring theme that human perception may be the bottleneck, not the phenomenon itself. And if AI becomes the Ouija board with better formatting, I would like several safety labels immediately. Then there's the Shroud of Turin, which is like the World Championship of unresolved argument. Radiocarbon dating on a repaired patch points to a medieval date, roughly 1260 to 1390. Skeptics say, there you go, case closed. Supporters say not so fast, because the sampled area may have been from a later repair and the image itself doesn't behave like ordinary pigment. Microscopic studies show multiple layers, including later paint additions, and blood tests have been cited as suggesting real human blood. So the shroud lives in that maddening zone where science, faith, contamination, and interpretation all start shoving each other. The running theme here is almost rude in how consistent it is. Weird experiences, bad information, and labels that explain just enough to start another argument. That's only Joe for today. If you heard one thing in here and immediately wanted to text somebody, mission accomplished. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.